The following is my version of a mandibular block. One of the landmarks for the mandibular block is the lingula. The Halsted mandibular block is traditionally taught with a needle penetration site of 1 centimeter above the mandibular occlusal plane. Research shows that the lingula lies at or below 1 centimeter above the mandibular occlusal plane 84% of the time. If instead we look to 1.5 centimeters above the mandibular occlusal plane, we see that the lingula lies here or below 96% of the time. Therefore, if one changes the position of the needle penetration only such that it is 1/2 centimeter higher, we should anticipate a success rate of roughly 12% higher. The Halsted mandibular block also teaches that the needle endpoint should be 50% of the mesial distal length of the ramus distally. However, data tells us that the lingula is a little bit further toward the distal, and 60% would be more ideal. To perform my version of the mandibular block, you approach from the contralateral premolars. The needle penetrates soft tissue at 1.5 centimeters above the mandibular occlusal plane, and the barrel of the syringe remains parallel to the mandibular occlusal plane. The needle tip has its endpoint as 60% of the mesial distal length of the ramus distally. In my mandibular block, a 25 gauge long needle is used, and it is advanced until bone is contacted. Upon contacting bone, the needle is withdrawn 1 millimeter and aspiration performed. 3/4 of the cartridge of local anesthetic solution is slowly injected over a 2-minute period. After depositing local anesthetic solution for the inferior alveolar nerve, the needle is withdrawn halfway and aspiration again performed. At this location, the lingual nerve may be injected with most of the contents of the cartridge that remain. Saving a few drops of local anesthetic for the long buccal nerve as needed is recommended. The next slide shows an illustration of the neuroanatomy of the mandible. Note this view is from the medial aspect of the ramus, and note where the inferior alveolar nerve enters the ramus. The next slide is a clinical intraoral photograph. Note the pterygomandibular raphe is that portion of soft tissue distal to the terminal molar. The raphe is a landmark only. Needle penetration is not accomplished in this area. There is a very distinct line on the lateral aspect of this raphe. This line does denote the location point for the needle tip to penetrate soft tissue, and therefore I have termed this area the poke me line. The final slide is another intraoral clinical photograph. This photograph demonstrates the proper needle positioning at the poke me line. It also demonstrates proper depth of needle penetration. The needle is advanced until bone is contacted, piercing the poke me line of soft tissue. Upon contacting bone, the needle is withdrawn, aspiration performed, and local anesthetic deposited. Historically, this mandibular block has proven to be very successful.